Good morning, Year 4, and welcome to Tuesday's English lesson today, where we're going to continue reading the next part of the Horned Helmet. So just before we listen to the next chapter, I just wanted to recap where we got up to yesterday. So we started reading the beginning of chapter 5 yesterday, and it was called Bear Sark. We found out exactly what a bear sark was. You'll remember yesterday we started thinking about whether we were fearful of a bear sark or whether we are thinking that bear sarks are heroic, perhaps. Okay, so we would respect them. So today we're going to continue reading the chapter and we're going to find out a little bit more about bear sarks as well. You'll remember towards the end of the section that we read yesterday, Bjorn and all of the Viking crew have come off reindeer and they are making their way to the village and they are ready to raid that village. Okay, we know that the men are not going to be in their houses because they're going to be collecting the herring at the shore. So the Vikings are expecting to be able to go in to the village, raid and take the treasures that they think that they deserve, and then come away again problem free. Okay, so as you're listening to chapter 5, I wonder if you could make a prediction as to what you think might happen while they are raiding the village. Okay. Also, I want you to be thinking about these questions while you're listening to Miss Eddleston reading. So I want you to think about, why do the Vikings tie sheepskin around their feet before they set off? We don't find the answer in the text, but I wonder if you could use your inference skills to pick out the clues as to why they might be doing that. Okay, why have they tied sheepskin around their feet when they go into the village? Why is Starcad and Scalagrim, who are sent into the chief's huts, why is it them? Okay, why didn't any of the other Vikings go into the chief's hut? Why just Starcad and Scalagrim? Why do you think they create such a dramatic entrance as they're going into the village? You'll find out as we listen to the chapter that they start shouting and they're yelling as they run in and out of the huts and people's houses. I want you to think about, why did they do that? And then finally, your last question is, what were they looking for? Why have they gone into the village? And do you think it's right for them to take what they want? Do you think they're doing something that perhaps would be considered as wrong nowadays? So I want you to just think about your answers to these questions. You don't need to write them down. You could have a chat with a family member about your answers to these questions, and it will just help you to really gather an understanding of the chapter. Okay, so I want you to pause me now. Head over to YouTube, or you can click the link that's just in the Google Drive there, and it will take you to the next part of Chapter 5. It will be called Chapter 5, Part 2. Pause now and enjoy. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed listening to Chapter 5. What a dramatic chapter, don't you think? So, this week we are going to be doing some journalistic writing, okay? And the aim at the end of this week is going to be that we will write our own newspaper reports. So by Friday of this week, obviously today's only Tuesday, so we've got quite a few days to be able to do this. We are going to produce our very own newspaper report. And it's not going to be a newspaper report for today. We are going to be the journalists and imagine that we are there at the scene after the raid. Okay, so the raid has taken place. The Vikings were extremely vicious as they went in and they took what they wanted, and we are going to report exactly what happened. Okay, we're going to pretend we know that a journalist would write a newspaper right after the event has happened. So they would perhaps interview some people, they would perhaps go to the scene and find exactly what it would be like there, and you're going to imagine that that's exactly what you are doing. Okay, so by Friday you will have written your own newspaper report and you will be reporting the raid that has just happened on the village of Briar. Okay, so it's going to be really, really important that we understand exactly what did happen and we understand exactly what a newspaper needs. And that's going to be the focus of our learning today. So today we are going to be thinking about the features of a newspaper report, okay? And by the end of this lesson, you're going to have a really good understanding as to all the things that you're going to need to include in your own newspaper report when we start writing them later in the week, okay? So your first task for today then, now that we've listened to the chapter and we know exactly what's happened in the story, your first task today is to have a read of this newspaper report that I've provided you here, okay? You'll find a copy of it in the Google Drive, okay? So I want you to read through it, and once you've read through it, I want you to start thinking about what are all the things that this newspaper has, the features that makes it a newspaper, okay? Now we know things like capital letters and full stops and conjunctions, and all of those types of features are things that we would see in every piece of writing, okay? So today I want you to be thinking about what things does this newspaper report have that makes it different to a story, or makes it different to a poem, or different to a non-fiction information text, for example, okay? So what I want you to do is pause the video now, have a read of this to yourself, and just jot down some bullet points of the things that you think this newspaper has, okay? Pause now. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed reading the newspaper report, and I hope you've got a really good idea of the different features that a newspaper report needs. We're going to go through those features together now, and then you can check off on your list. You can tick off to see if you've got them all. If there is anything on your list that you've created that perhaps you didn't include, make sure you jot it down, because those are going to become your success criteria for later in the week. Okay, so let's have a look together. I've got my list created here. I'm just going to pop me over here. So I know that the first thing that I can see in that newspaper report is it stands out as a big bold title, and we call that in a newspaper report a headline. Okay, and the reason that the headline is there is to grab people's attention so that they want to read the newspaper report. It's supposed to be dramatic, it's supposed to be short and catchy to really give the reader a little bit of attention as to what's going on in that story, in that newspaper. Okay, so you can see this headline here says raids reduce village to ruins, and I wonder if you can spot what other feature the headline has other than just being big and bold. Yeah, that's right. It uses alliteration. And the reason it uses alliteration is because it makes it memorable. Okay, it means that the person reading it, who's interested in the news, is going to remember exactly what that headline was. It will stay in their mind. Okay, so the letter R, raids, reduce, and ruins. That's what I mean by alliteration. Okay, using a word that starts with the same letter. Okay, to really grab attention and make it memorable. Okay, so those words in that headline have purposely been produced in order to make it catchy and memorable for the person that's reading it. Okay, let's read on to the next chapter, next paragraph then, and let's have a think and see what does that paragraph have that might be different to a story, for example. Okay, so the next paragraph says, according to our sources, a horrific event took place last night in the otherwise quiet and peaceful fishing village. Apparently, the crime was committed in the dead of night along the coast of Scotland. Okay, so quite a short paragraph. There's only a couple of sentences there. I can only see 2 sentences there. And we call that an orientation. So you can see that word written here. Okay, an orientation always comes at the start of a newspaper report, and it just introduces the newspaper with the key things. And you can see the who, the what, the when, the where, and sometimes the why as well, okay, why they did it. So if we unpick that a little bit more, I can see the who was involved in this raid. So I can see a peaceful fishing village. They were involved in the raid, okay? So that's an example of the who, okay, who was involved in this newspaper story. The what's happened, a horrific event took place. So that dramatic vocab is used there in order to grab the reader's attention, okay, to make it sound really, really bad, because it's the news. It has to be, okay? And it also talks about the when it happened. According to our sources, a horrific event took place last night. Okay, so it tells us the when something happened. Okay, and it also tells us where, along the coast of Scotland. Okay, so it gives us those 4 W's there to start with. Okay, the who, the what, the when, the where. Okay, and it does that in a very, very short paragraph in only 2 sentences. Then as we read on, we can see the next paragraph starts to go into a little bit more detail. So they're explaining the main event. Okay, so telling the reader of the newspaper everything that happened. And the important thing to notice in that is that it happens in chronological order. Now that means it happens in the time order. So the news report is reported in the order of time that the events happened in that chapter. Okay, so it says to start with, eyewitnesses have reported, because remember, the journalist won't have been there when the event took place. Okay, so the eyewitnesses are the people that the journalist would be relying on. Okay, so the eyewitnesses have reported the sightings of a strange and brutal men arriving in longships and invading the shores. So that's the first thing that happened. Okay. In addition, there's been a shocking raid upon the village of Briar by barbaric invaders, which has resulted in robberies and several deaths. So then the next thing that happened was the raid, and people have had things stolen from them, and perhaps people were killed as well. Okay, so the events have been described in order. You'll also notice that all of the verbs within this text are in past tense. And the reason for that is because the journalist would always be writing the newspaper report after it's happened. Okay, so it has to be in past tense. And I can see that here. Eyewitnesses have reported. So we know that that's already happened. The men arriving in longships and invading the shores. There has been a shocking raid upon the village of Briar, which has resulted. Okay, so all of those words tell us that these things have already happened. Okay, so everything is in the past tense. And you'll see towards the end of the newspaper report that perhaps that changes slightly, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, so you can see that each of the events have been written into detailed paragraphs. Okay, so you can see sections between them. I can see a gap here in between my orientation and the main event that's happened, and then another gap here as we have a little bit more detail. So as we read that little bit more detail, we can see the different pieces of vocab that's been used, the fact that there's going to be some time conjunctions to help order. Okay, we know time conjunctions tell us when something happened. So next, soon, after that. Okay, so we might see some examples of time conjunctions to be able to order the events. You'll also see some emotive language. The journalist purposely wants to shock the reader. Okay, and the words that have been used do exactly that. We've already seen some examples of that. So we saw a shocking raid. Okay, that adjective has been put in there in order to make it clear that this is quite emotive. We want the reader to feel something, and we want them to be shocked by this piece of writing. Barbaric invaders. Okay, another example there to get that reader feeling something. Okay. We'll also see as we go down this list that there's a quotation from a witness, because as we've said, the journalist wouldn't have been in the event. The journalist wouldn't see the event happening. They'd know about it afterwards. But the eyewitnesses, the people that were there at the time, would know what happened. So a journalist might interview an eyewitness to tell them exactly what did happen at that part of the event. So if I look through the next paragraph, I can see, furthermore, it seems that these vile brutes are Norsemen or Vikings from the countries in the north. These are the countries of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Tragically, they did not come in peace and launched a surprise attack upon the village while most of the men were fishing. We were so terrified that all we could do was pray to Odin for our lives, a female villager stated. Clearly, these thieves are not only murderers, but cowards too, seeing no wrong in scaring innocent women and children. Okay, so we can see here, while it's been added a bit more detail of the event that's happened, and we've got that emotion in there to make it sound really, really shocking, we've also got a bit further down, we were all so terrified that all we could do was pray to Odin for our lives. Okay, and we can see the speech marks there to show that somebody's saying that. Okay, so a female villager has been interviewed, and that is the quotation from a witness. Okay, And then the final paragraph is what we call the reorientation in a newspaper. And that kind of brings all of the events together. But you'll notice that this is written in present tense because it's talking about what the villagers should do in the future now. Okay, so it is hoped that the vicious Vikings have now fled with their stolen goods. However, the public are warned to keep a lookout along the coastline in case of further attacks. Okay, so again, it's written in that present tense there and giving the reader advice, okay, of what they should do in the future. So it's written there for future tense as well. Okay, so you can see a really clear list of things that we're going to need to be doing within our writing later on in the week. Okay, and hopefully you've got that success criteria written down now. That's going to help you to give you kind of a bit of a to-do list, a checklist to say, first I need to do this and then I need to do this. And I've purposely written these in the order that we're going to be doing them later in the week. Okay, so our final task for today then is going to be to start thinking about that chronological order, because as we've said, we know that a newspaper report has to be reported in the order that things has happened. So I've taken some of the main events that we're probably going to be using in our newspaper reports later in the week, and I want you to have a read of them and just jot down on a piece of paper the time order that they happened in. So I've purposely mixed them up. Okay, they're not in the right order. I want you to have a read and I want you to decide which order they come in. And you might want to use arrows to show the events in order as you go. Okay, so the treasures and food taken by the brutes. Okay, that wasn't the first thing that happened, so I know that shouldn't come first. Occurred during the dead of night. Village of Briar frightened for their lives. Vikings landed their longships to begin their invasion. Warriors stormed the village, yelling and shouting as they went. Starcad remained in Chief's house and would not come away. And then a tall girl with plaits tried to defend herself. So each of those things are currently mixed up. Your final task for today is to can you jot them down in chronological order? And that will help you when we come to think about our newspapers tomorrow. Okay? So thank you guys for listening. I hope you have fun. I hope you're enjoying the story still. And I'll see you tomorrow where we're going to begin thinking about what our newspapers are going to look like. Okay. See you soon. Bye bye.